Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Many of us dream of making a difference. Lord knows there's much in our world that needs changing. But how does one go about it? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to uncover the secrets behind becoming a change agent is Ginny Whitelaw. Dr. Ginny Whitelaw is an 86th generation Zen Leadership Zen master, Chosei Zen priest, and founder of the Institute for Zen Leadership. She's the author of award-winning Resonate and The Zen Leader. Ginny is also co-developer of FEBI, a personality assessment that links mind, body, and behaviors. Formerly deputy manager for integrating NASA's space station, she has a doctorate in biophysics and degrees in physics and philosophy. Her website, zenleader.global. Ginny, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
So good to be here, Gwilda.
Your bio says you were a deputy manager for integrating NASA's space station. What all did that involve?
Well, it involved at first going to NASA, where I had a dream to be an astronaut as a little kid. That just really burned in me. And NASA first gave me a lot of encouragement. Even as a little kid, I wrote a letter to them, and they wrote me back saying, you should take these kind of classes in college and graduate school. And I followed that letter to the T and applied after I got out of graduate school to the program. And I didn't become an astronaut, but they said, you look interesting. Come on down here. We'll give you a job. And I ended up going up through the ranks of management and leadership rather than going into space.
Well, probably safer, or maybe not. Maybe not. So what did your work with NASA contribute to your insights about resilience and leadership?
Wow. Well, first, I was very grateful to NASA for training me as a leader. They took me through all kinds of leadership programs because I was being groomed for senior executive service. And first, what I learned in those was the dimensions of leadership, what leadership has to do. It was very useful. But what I noticed in those was that they left out the body. And by this time, I had been training for more than a decade in martial arts and meditation, something I had started in college and graduate school, where Aikido had led to training in Zen. And I knew how important the body was to leadership. And it wasn't being taught in conventional leadership programs. Maybe in the military, it's brought out more or something, but not in regular leadership programs, civilian leadership programs. And I thought, maybe this is my work to do, because when you really work with the body, you work with the part of you that holds change in place or is the source of agility or not. You're working with the part that changes more slowly than thought. And in that, you're able to master new leadership approaches, or you also get held back from making needed changes. So how you work with the body really matters.
So go into that a little bit deeper. How does working with the body help with being a leader?
Well, if you try to change something with your mind, try to grab a hold of the next thought you think, and grab a hold of that thought and don't let it go. And maybe like turn that thought around. It's very hard to work with thought. It's a slippery little energetic signal, and you're not thinking the same thought you were thinking a few seconds ago. Meanwhile, when you work with the physicality of the body, if you were just, and even listening to this, if you just folded your arms, you'd notice that your body had a preference for which arm was on top, a kind of go-to. But if you had to turn that around, if you had to reverse that for some reason, you surely could. You could just fold your arms a different way. So when you're working with the body, you're working with a material form that holds energy. And it becomes a vessel for how energy is conducted. So it may make no difference which way you fold your arms, but the way you carry your body and your leadership presence, your centeredness, the feeling that people get being in a room with you, the energy that you exude, the energy patterns you choose to use to engage different leadership situations, those make an enormous difference. And those are all available through the body.
It sounds like your training in Aikido must have really contributed to this. When you were training, did they do everything bilaterally, like you do an exercise to the left and you do exactly the same to the right and back and forth?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Aikido, which literally translates as the way to harmonize energy, is great leadership training because it's giving you the tools to read energy, to join with it, and to redirect it. So there's a lot of lessons for leadership that come out of Aikido. And then working bilaterally, as you say, Gwilda, you also feel into your own condition more of what side's more awkward, what's less awkward, where are the stuck points, what needs working. And working out those stuck points tends to be very fruitful for developing a kind of agility and ability to meet any situation at any time.
I know when you're talking energy, the left side of the body or the left hand tends to be the negative charge, and the right tends to be the positive, in that one gives and one receives. How does that work then with leadership and working with energy in a group?
Um, the kind of energy patterns that I'm more familiar with, rather than the giving receiving that you just mentioned, are how those patterns play out through the whole nervous system. And what they relate to are patterns that focus more narrowly, focus in using more the flexor side of the body, versus focus out and open up to possibility using more the extensor side of the body. And as you know, the body only moves through opposing muscle groups. So how those muscle groups get coordinated is something our nervous system has to figure out. And it turns out there are 4 large scale patterns for doing that. And those patterns shift how we give and how we receive as leaders. One of them tends to be very much directive and driver and pushing on people. So it's a very giving kind of energy in a directive way. And the other is more expansive and open and is receiving signals, receiving the periphery. And that tends to be much more open to possibilities.
It gives people, the people you're working with, a place to be as well, doesn't it? Instead of being bombarded with your intent.
That's right. And when you know how to skillfully work with energy, you even know how to work with energy that's bombarding you versus energy that feels stuck and still. So you learn how to work with all kinds of people and read the energies that they're presenting.
How do you read that? Or do you read it through body language? Do you pick it up in your body? How do you read that?
Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. You have it exactly right, Gwilda. We exude an electromagnetic field. We just do. Our heart is very key in creating that field, and that field it can be sensed in the vicinity of a person. We don't have a name for that sense, but you can feel it kind of in the vibe of a relationship. You can kind of feel when there's resonance, or we sometimes say when you're on the same wavelength with someone. And what we know physiologically is that when we are on the same wavelength, we make maps of one another. We are actually representing each other in our own brain bodies. And that helps us know how to follow each other. So there's been a lot of studies that look at this, that when people deeply understand each other, they and can complete each other's sentences and whatnot, that there's an actual mapping in the cortex of one brain into another. So between the senses we name, like visually reading body language, and the senses we don't name, like sensing a field or making an internal map, we can read the energy in other people and, in a sense, replicate it in ourselves. So that empathy is going bone deep in us.
That leads to a much deeper sense of connection and understanding, doesn't it?
It sure does. It sure
Yeah.
does.
Wow. Wow. This is a skill that you don't hear very many people talking about in leadership classes or in anything. Um, and it sounds like it's kind of a missing link. How important would you say it is versus the other things that we work with?
It's key in what we call emotional intelligence. In emotional intelligence, which has been all the rage for the last several decades in terms of leadership development, because they realize you can't make difficult things happen in an organization without emotional intelligence. That is self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. Some of these things used to be called soft skills, but leaders have realized they're pretty hard to practice because, as you say, they aren't things we trained in school. Maybe we trained in some social skills and getting along with others and whatnot, but we generally built up our rational learning skills, our critical thinking skills in school, and may have largely separated the head from the body and how we did that. What emotional intelligence calls us to do is reconnect head and heart, to feel other people, not just think about them. And in that feeling, there is more unity. There's more one-withness. There's more a sense of, I feel your pain. I don't just observe you from a distance and say, poor you. And in that connection, we build trust. We build a feeling like, I've got you. You've got my back. We get each other. That feeling is irreplaceable in leadership because people are always trying to figure out with a leader, do I want to follow you? And if a leader exudes a certain kind of self-awareness, an ability to regulate themselves, an ability to let people feel heard and felt, then yes, I want to follow that kind of leader. I mean, obviously we look for competence in the areas of leadership too, but in terms of the humanity and the feeling we get from a person, do I want to go into a difficult situation with you? Would I follow you where I wouldn't go by myself? The qualities of emotional intelligence matter enormously.
And if you're connected in that way, when you're having to think on your feet, like in a combat situation, I would think you would be much more effective.
Well, indeed, when you can relax and connect with the team, for example, that you're a part of, and Navy SEALs talk about this all the time of making the switch, right, or into a kind of collective flow state where they don't even need verbal communication to kind of think on the same wavelength. They just get what's going on because they've all been so trained for the mission and in sync with each other. That kind of a flow state allows people to function without the thinking of a separate I getting in the way.
That separate eye is a big problem, isn't it?
Well, it makes us think we're separate, and that's a delusion, but it's a really bright delusion in our psyche, and it's so bright that it blinds us to our larger nature. It's like we don't see the stars when the sun is out, but when the sun sets, we see something much bigger and broader and universal. And the same is true in the human being. When the ego is blaring at us its I-centered needs, we don't see our original nature. But when that we see through that, we can feel into how truly connected and boundless we are.
Well, it's time for us to take a station break. Ginny and I will return very shortly. Don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. What is a Zen leader as opposed to a not so Zen leader? With us this hour discussing making a difference is Ginny Whitelaw. Dr. Ginny Whitelaw is the author of Resonate, Zen, and the Way of Making a Difference. Ginny, as a Zen master, how do you define Zen leadership?
Well, it goes to what we were talking about just before the break. Who's leading? Is it a separate or thinks it's separate I, or are we connected to our whole nature? And one of the favorite definitions that I've heard of leadership, just regular any leadership, that came from Kevin Cashman, was authentic self-expression that creates value. So if you feel into that, you can feel into the truth that it's not about a position in a hierarchy. It's about living into your purpose, expressing your nature into the world in service of others. What Zen brings to that or takes away from that is the separate self. So we would say it's expression of the authentic self in service of others. And that authenticity or that bigness takes away fear, because the part of us that gets afraid is the part that's trying to protect this. this life, this body, this self, this reputation, this whatever, right? And when we don't focus there, we start to use this instrument in service of all that it can do.
it, when a person first thinks they want to be a leader, there's various reasons for that might be. And my observation is that a lot of people that think they want to be a leader are coming from a place of ego because it will make them feel important or make them appear important. This seems diametrically opposed to what you're talking about.
Right. Well, that's right. It's not unusual for people to be drawn to leadership because they want to achieve or they want power or things like that. And yet, those needs often, can drive leaders to do very self-centered things, right? So it's not that, I won't say that's wrong. I'll just say it's not our greatest truth. There's a greater truth that is how we can use this vessel to serve others rather than using all of life to serve ourselves.
Now, right now, it seems like the way everything's wired, it's the latter. How do we turn that around? I mean, even those of us that, have a low self-esteem and want to be a leader to build ourselves up, how can we how can we turn it around to where we are serving others, making space for others to serve as well versus building our ego?
Yeah. I go back to the body because trying to turn it around by just giving myself some positive affirmation, like you're good enough, go out and do it, or you're okay, you don't have to prove yourself. I those little kind of calendar sayings, they don't hold up under pressure. But if you go into the body and you start to cultivate genuine centeredness, and in my tradition of Zen, we focus a great deal on breathing into the center, the Japanese call hara, Hara, the lower abdomen, lower chakras, if you know the chakra system. But it's the center of gravity in the body, but that lower abdomen is the deepest, slowest, most grounded breath. When those muscles start regulating the lungs from underneath, we settle down, we calm down. And when we start to connect at that level, it's like that whole vagal system is going to send signals to the brain, sort of like, you got this. You got, settle down. You got this. There's a kind of genuine courage and cutting through discursive thought that happens from hara-centered breathing. So we train leaders in that all the time. That's one of the foundational practices that we use to help leaders find that place in themselves that they can trust. And in that, once you can start to feel into that inherent connectedness, there's the sense of needing to prove starts to evaporate, or it becomes more transparent. I won't say it goes away altogether, because a lot of these urges or needs come deep from our childhood, or they might even be intergenerational trauma or reinforced through a lifetime of habit. So it's not like they instantly disappear, but they don't grip us the same way, and they become increasingly transparent so that we can connect to what's true and say, oh yeah, there's my old habit of needing to prove myself again, but I don't have to act on it. That's where that self-regulation comes in.
So are you talking about diaphragmatic breathing?
It's even deeper than diaphragmatic. The diaphragm is certainly involved in it, but the diaphragm, as you may know, is a huge membrane at the solar plexus level that goes all the way around underneath the rib cage, lining the rib cage. There's a relationship between the diaphragm and actually the pelvic floor, with how those two can work together to control breath from the lower abdomen. And we teach and train in that method in a way that helps people experience a deep centeredness, and then it allows breath to slow down. When breath slows down, even the rate at which thought develops can slow down. We become much more stable.
When our thoughts slow down, we become much more stable. Doesn't that give us room and time to weigh our options and our decisions?
There's a phrase that I like from mountain climbers and Navy SEALs that says, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So when we are smooth, we're able to meet each moment and each person one with, as opposed to up, kind of bouncing off of it as we vibrate around frenetically.
You speak of resonance. Is there some exercise or something that one can do to resonate with another? And maybe the other isn't a good place to resonate full time. Can you use that resonance to pull them back into the center?
Interesting. This breath is one of the real tools that we use to help, get on the same wavelength with someone, but just even following the breath and helping people settle down. I find in my coaching with people, I'll often use this to just, if they kind of come in all excited, all kind of spun up, I'll just help, sort of breathe slowly with them without even saying I'm breathing slowly with you, but to help them just ground. And as they start to settle down, then we can have a deeper conversation. So matching breath can be a good, to resonate is to vibrate with, to just give a definition of what resonance is. And it is the principle of all change. So if you're trying to bring about a change in a relationship, finding that, I'll say, frequency where you can connect, where you can meet, where you can join is really useful. And one of the ways to do it is to kind of sense where the person's breathing, kind of meet them there and maybe ground it a little bit, join with them. So that's a very practical exercise for trying to get on the same wavelength with someone, on the same vibration.
Once you get on the same vibration, say for instance you're in a situation where it's everybody's panicking, there's fire around or whatever, and it's up to you to kind of lead them out into safety. Once you resonate with them, how do you keep from being pulled into the trauma versus drawing them into the groundedness?
That's where it requires the inner work. The inner work, which is how to not be triggered myself. So if we're able to just ground the energy, like a lightning rod takes energy from lightning right to the ground without it getting stuck in between. When our whole body can work that way, then we can be in a mess without being messed up. We can take that energy and just ground it without it triggering us. But if we have a lot of triggers in it, like, oh, I'm all upset too, if it triggers us, then we just join the mess. So part of what we train leaders in is how to work through their own triggers so that their own fears and triggers and difficulties become more transparent, less grippy, easier to pass through. So as when they are in difficult energetic situations, it can pass through.
So you're literally using your body to ground the other person as well as
Absolutely.
yourself.
That's right.
Whoa, I like that. It seems so much less invasive in a way
Yeah.
because it's internal. It's not imposing something on someone else.
No,
Yeah.
no. And when we're around somebody who's really centered and stable, or they have a really clear kind of field sense, or we might call it strong executive presence or calm executive presence, we feel better. We feel better. So far from being imposing ourselves on someone, it's creating a field that attracts other people, that other people would actually choose to be in.
There's a concept called common neutral heart space that I teach how to do, and this sounds very similar in that you're putting this open heart space out between the two of you rather than imposing it. Is it similar to that at all?
Well, you're the expert in that, and I am not. So you are going to have to tell me how similar it is. What is, so many wisdom traditions really overlap on this.
Mhm.
What we notice in what the research from Heart Math Institute, for example, has shown is that when we can have a kind of coherence or resonance between heart and brain, which
Mhm.
happens at about 1/10 of a hertz, about 1 every 10 seconds, a certain frequency where the waves sort of add up rather than interfere with each other, we create a field that is much more inviting. And I would bet that relates to the kind of common neutral heart space that you talk about.
Do you have a way of getting in resonance with yourself? As I'm listening to you, there's a lot of different parts going on here. Don't we have to kind of find our own resonance before we start interfacing with others?
That coherence, or getting our own, being coherent in ourself is always a good starting point. And in my own experience, that's a coherence among head, heart, and hara, as I mentioned earlier, bringing these three centers together. So when we breathe deeply and slowly, like 2 to 3 times a minute, which, by the way, is quite a bit slower than the average. And most people breathe about 11 to 15 times a minute. And that's not when they're exercising. That's what's when they're huffing and puffing through daily life. So to slow that down is taking people out of a very high frequency state into something 2 to 3 times a minute, like a 20-second breath, allows the hara, the heart, the head to all sort of add up into one coherent signal. Much easier to handle stressful situations when you're starting from that kind of place. And I'm a person who grew up with asthma, who could not breathe when she was a kid, and who knew a thing or two about anxiety. So I can tell you, it's a much happier way to live.
When it sounds like we're dealing with this is a key to being able to manage time in a certain way, isn't it?
Well, time is an interesting dimension in this, because how we think about time it relates to our psychology too. Time, it is, in one sense, it's always the same time, Gwilda. It's always now. It's always now. But how we think about the clock and managing it comes out of our personality. And it comes out of, again, those energy patterns I was talking about earlier. Some people fight against the time. The time is to beat the clock, get as much done in unit time as I can. I'm always racing against time. Other people are judiciously managing time. This goes here, that goes there. They're organizing their day according to time. Other people are just being, right? They're just being in time, and time flows, right? So we vary with respect to our relationship with time. And that relationship changes how we approach leadership and changes how we direct others when we are a leader.
Is it very important then to ascertain what your relationship to time is when you're getting started here?
Yeah, because initially we think our relationship we're blind to it. We think it's the only relationship possible. So yes, very good to know there are several different possibilities, and which is my go-to. What do I tend to do? And speaking personally, I was a time manager for many years, project management, project manager at NASA. You got to know how to manage some things, manage some details on time. So that was a go-to for me. And it's really been relaxing for me to see vigor on different ways to play with time, and how, as I slow down, there's a sense of doing only what's needed to be done rather than doing everything on my to-do list.
Speaking about time, it's time for a break.
There you go.
We'll be right back, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Do you have to be fearless to make change? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing fearlessness and leadership is Dr. Ginny Whitelaw. Her website, zenleader.global. Ginny, let's talk about fear. I mean, I don't think anybody's confronted being a leader or making a change without having to confront fear somewhat. What are your thoughts on fear and how to confront it?
And how to confront it. Bring it close. That's what I say, bring it close, meaning the things that we fear relate to needs that we're afraid aren't going to be met, and we all have human needs. So how we work with fear is often unconscious. It's like I may do something as a leader, like achieve or push on something or demand a goal or go here, not realizing that my fear of failure is what's making me push so hard on other people. Why am I afraid of failure? Well, if I fail, I might not be good enough. I might be worthless. I might get fired. I might be out of a job. All that runs often very unconsciously. But when we look it in the face, look it in the eye, draw it close, it's like fear loses its leverage over us. Because there are only a few basic human fears. I call them the roots of the tree. When you really trace down what causes conflict in human relationships, what traces conflict in our life, the things that make us unhappy, when you trace it down to the roots, they're related to things like not good enough, not safe enough, not smart enough, not this enough, not rich enough, not something enough. And that not enoughness is worth looking at. It's worth looking at deeply. So part of what we train with in Zen leader programs is how to help people look at their fears. You said confront them. I want to say penetrate them, actually penetrate the fear so that they can see how it's operating in them. Some fears grow out of needs that in the psychological terms would be called proxy needs from the work of Janoff. He identified that oftentimes as kids, little kids, before we're logical or anything, we may substitute one need for another, like I'm hungry, but no one's feeding me, so I'll just make a scene instead. And we substitute the need for some kind of physical attention for just getting any kind of attention, as an example. Needs that are proxy needs have no natural fill line. If we're healthy and normal, we have a fill line to our needs. We know what enough is. But if we have somehow made a substitution, we may not know what enough is. It may be never enough. And maybe we all know leaders. I know some leaders who will say there's never enough money, never enough wealth, never enough power, never enough, right? That's a proxy need. That's a need of an unfillable hole. And if a leader can't look at that, they're always going to be ruled by it. But when a leader looks at it closely and deeply, they can start again to see through it and see the roots of it in their own life and their own psyche. And it's not that it goes away entirely, it's that it doesn't grip them or trip them up the same way. So they become less fearful, fearless.
Well, you had to be pretty fearless to bring this spiritual stuff into a scientific world that you work in. How do you see science and spirituality fitting together in all of this?
Oh, like hand in glove, really. I loved science. In that I think as a little kid, maybe like you, maybe like so many people drawn to mission evolution, I wanted to figure stuff out, right? I wanted to know what's going on. And science was one of the ways to get at answers, right? Along with a lot of the spiritual religious wisdom traditions. Those were the kind of the routes we had. What I really appreciate about science is that it allowed us to build wisdom from one generation to the next because it was objective. You could come up with a set of facts, you could publish them in a paper, I could read them, I could add to those facts and publish for the next generation, and on we could go from Aristotle to the present. And science has taught us so much, but it's that objectivity that gets in the way of deep spiritual truths. Because even physics, even quantum physics, for the last 100 years has known that objectivity is actually a myth, that the very process of viewing something is an action. It's not passive. The process of perception is itself injecting energetic consciousness into a system that changes the system. And so objectivity is a approximation. It is not a truth. And spirituality goes where science can't go in being able to see through the dualism on which science is based. Zen is going to work through all dualism to see the intrinsic unity of what is going on. Unity, that last word in our title, that it opens up that unity consciousness so that we start to sense how we are a part of this whole picture, not apart from it, which, by the way, contributes to fearlessness, when you feel a part of the whole picture.
Are you talking about the observer effect then, basically?
It's the observer effect. It is the observer effect, and we've seen it. It was recognized in social science some time ago as well, that the very process of studying a human system by a human could change the system. But even in completely inanimate, in a particle accelerator, and when you look, you change the system. And one of the ways this is described is called collapsing the wave function, that a wave of probability becomes a particle here or there upon observation. So as Sean Carroll, the physicist, described quantum physics in 5 words, he was challenged to do this for some reason. He said, don't look, wave, look, particle. So that is an observer effect.
Interesting. So that kind of makes a lot of scientific study defunct, doesn't it?
Well, it's good to know the limits of your instrument. It puts a lot of science in context, I would say. And when you read a lot about quantum physics and quantum physicists, it was quite disorienting to them to realize this observer effect. I mean, I'm sitting here with a quote on my desk from someone who says the true human value of a human being can be found in the degree to which he has attained liberation from the self. That's Albert Einstein saying that. Albert Einstein, so the marriage between some of these scientists who started sensing the interconnectedness of things and the illusion of self, and the spiritual traditions that have been pointing toward that are not far apart.
So how does the using the Zen and the spiritual, which is unity versus taking things apart and observing them, how does that fill in for science? Where science let's go. How do those work together?
Well, science is going to reveal things like laws of nature, or what in a spiritual tradition like Taoism might be called the inner pattern. It's going to reveal the way things unfurl in a certain way, a certain order out of chaos. Science is going to be very good at discriminating and discerning those kinds of things. But when it comes to experiencing the true nature of the human being, or the connectedness to all of life, a deep meditative practice is going to go further than science. In my own experience, my own meditative practice took me further than my science did in sensing, seeing, experiencing the self beyond the ego, kind of the whole boundless picture. And as Rumi says, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the whole ocean in a drop. That experience changes people. And that experience is available through meditation in a way that for me was not available in science. Science is going to take apart the drop.
So how do we put all this together to become a change agent?
Well, it's it goes together quite well, because what we begin to realize, let's just put together what you and I have just been talking about, that observation is itself an event. So the way we look at it in Buddhism, in a wisdom tradition like Buddhism or Zen, is that mind is universal, and that we're in a sense antennas for mind. We're antennas for tapping into it. When we are attuned to the field, we tap into that wisdom much more readily. And what people like Einstein, for example, would say is they would get their greatest ideas as a kind of flash of inspiration, but then had to engage the hard work of mathematics and rigorous proof in order to show the inspiration. So there is a kind of interface between the flash of inspiration and the hard work to prove it. I think a similar thing goes on in change agents. That first we get an idea, boom, we think it's my idea, but it's not you could flip that around and say it's an idea that hit me. I resonated with it, and now it's going to ask for some change in me in order to be manifest in the world. As I tell leaders, when you have a vision and you want to bring something from the future into the present, when you continually evolve yourself to match the you of that vision, when you match that exactly, that vision is now, because now is where you exist. Check it out. You're here now. So you look at if you have an idea of a change you want to be, change you want to see, is how do I have to change? How do I let this vision change me? Well, I've got to add new people to my network. I have to organize my time differently. I have to develop more people. I need to add some people to my team. Blah, blah, blah. When I do those things, when I completely match that vision, I've brought it into now. So that's part of how change becomes through us as vessels, resonating with the field for the inspiration, and then according the field, one relationship at a time, one day at a time, of how we bring others along by resonating with them. So resonance, which is to vibrate with, is that principle both in how we get the idea, how we enact the idea, and how we bring others along.
Well, then that's backwards of how most of us do it. We get an idea and we try to impose it on the world
That's
versus
right. That's right.
becoming it.
That's right.
So
That's
so if
right.
if you understand resonance, then you realize that you have to have that resonance before you can manifest it in your world, right?
That's right. And if you don't resonate with your idea, no one else is going to, or someone else is going to run with it and take it. But the first person who has to light up with it is you. And if you get an idea and start working it and you're just finding, boy, this feels like work. This feels heavy. That's a pretty good sign that this isn't yours to do. But if you're working along and somehow there's a kind of effortless effort in it, it's kind of like building energy, and you float the idea to a friend and they go, "That's a great idea. Can I help you with it?" Or whatever, you start to build energy. That's a pretty good sign that there's something that wants to happen here. If we listen for those energetic signals, we'll know whether the ideas we have are ready to happen or not. Because ideas are a dime a dozen, but ideas that can be manifested through a leader are special. They have to match that leader, and they have to be ready and ripe in the time.
That certainly says a lot for some of our greatest leaders, doesn't it? So we're going to have to take another commercial break here. But on the other side, we'll get deeper into how to be a change agent. Please stay with us as Ginny and I continue to explore becoming change agents. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Stay with us. We'll be back. What are your energy patterns doing to your life? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Ginny Whitelaw. Her website, zenleader.global. Ginny, what is our frequency, our resonance, energy patterns doing to our lives that we're unaware of?
Well, it goes back to what we talked about in one of the earlier segments, Gwilda, about these energy patterns that run through our nervous system and regulate how we pick up signals, how we are going to resonate with the people and the ideas and the situations around us. So at the extremes are the highly attenuated driver pattern. If you just put your hands together and you just press and press and press, you can almost feel your peripheral vision shrinking down into like a laser point. That kind of determination is wonderful for hitting a target, reaching a goal, hitting a number. But it's not going to give us the big picture. In fact, it's easily blindsided. So as a change agent, it's very good if we know exactly what we need to do to bring in this kind of determination. On the other hand, being able to vibrate in a very open way, listen broadly, this kind of peripheral vision that you'd get if you were to look 180 degrees and see left and right without turning your head left or right, just see the whole dome around you. And kind of this expansive extensor side opening to possibility. That kind of energy is going to sense the field. It's going to hear quieter signals, ideas ready to happen. It's very creative, imaginary, inspiration-oriented pattern. And as those ideas emerge, boom, again, it's going to come back to the body to how to let that energy descend in a way that the organizer pattern can give it form, can kind of create some shape to it, of how we'd write a proposal for this or bring it to my boss or create a team around it. And then the collaborator energy, which is a kind of engaging swing pattern, a pattern of to and fro, back and forth, and easily engages people in conversation. These patterns come into play with our kind of inner team of energy patterns to go from idea to form to engagement to determination. This descent of energy through the physical body, through these patterns, helps us take an idea from the ether, if you were, an idea that got me, into something that matters, turning energy into matter.
When you're talking about the broad scope, 360, it occurs to me that our very way we're living right now is diametrically opposed to that. We spend all of our time focused forward, not knowing what's going on around us. And this has gotten worse over the last couple of generations with all the electronics. Do you see that impacting? And how do we need to be able to do both? Obviously, we need to be able to do both. How do you do that?
Yeah. There's so many habits and patterns in our culture, as you've said, that are training our attention certain ways. And being aware of that so that we can counteract that with some other time. And for example, getting out in nature is a great antidote to being in front of a screen, right? When you get out into the bigness of nature and the expanse of a landscape or the feeling of the big sky, there's something that opens up in us. So that kind of time in nature, very useful. It's also, again, I'm going to come back to meditation, can be so helpful to counteract the shortening of attention spans that tends to happen when we get addicted to the fast pace and close inness of the screen, the pop, 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 all the high frequency excitement and agitation. I have a couple of young nieces and nephews, grandnieces and grandnephews, I should say, who, have a house full of toys, but the most exciting toy to them is the cell phone. They love what's going on the phone, right? And you can just see how even at months old or year old, how the brain is getting trained for that kind of excitement and level of stimulation. So being intentional about creating time in our day, in our body, to slow down, to stop, so that we can be clear. It's like taking the agitation out of the water so it can reflect things clearly. So helpful, so useful.
And so easily forgotten in our day and age, I'm afraid. So you say we have a choice in how we resonate. What do you mean by that?
Well, we're all resonating all the time. It's not, there's no option about, do I put out vibrations? Am I feeding the field or shouldn't I feed the field? We're doing it. We're all getting a feeling from each other. What to be a living system is to ingest energy and evolve our order. That's what life does. That's what we do. So we are always feeding the field. The question is, what are we feeding it? And when we want to sincerely add value, we're going to go all the way back to that definition of leadership. We become more intentional about feeding it something worthwhile. When we want to bring other people along, we become more intentional about meeting them where they are and feeding into energy that will help them move with us or help them move toward an important goal. So when we can, as opposed to if we're just kind of, quote, all over the place, we create a kind of jaggedness to the field, a jaggedness to the situation that makes other people feel jagged. And it kind of propagates a nervous, anxious energy. That would not be our definition of leadership, right? That is not authentic self-expression that creates value. So if we really want to lead people toward a better place, lift people up, not crash people down, it calls on us to master enough of this instrument that we're able to regulate ourselves in the world and resonate the signals that help lift people up, settle them down, and bring out the best in them.
So, excuse me, it's that time in the show when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
Oh, to bring as many leaders to awakening and help them change this world, both in this generation and generations to come. It's so clear to me that we're facing a time of enormous collapse and unpredictability. And we need leaders who can lift people up, who can pull people through a storm and get them to the other side. And I'm deeply committed to developing as many of those leaders as possible.
That's a beautiful commitment. And how are Zen leaderships and resonance essential to the mission of evolving consciousness?
Well, I think in my own experience, it's been essential for me to be able to see through the self, that ego self, to the broader, boundless sense of who I am. It helps me relax as I kind of look at the mess of the day and see it more in a kind of, creative destruction or destructive creativeness. Who knows which it's going to be, but a kind of like it's all in the great cosmic dance. And you and I, Gwilda, are dancing with it. And when we can relax into that bigness and give it our best, there's this sense of knowing there's nowhere to be lost to. That feeling can fill us with a kind of resilience and calm that that helps us be of some use in this world.
It seems like, again, as we've been talking this hour, that the key to all of this is inside, the inner work to remove who we are not, so we can resonate with who we are. So how does a person begin that work?
Start with a long, slow exhale right now and get curious about what's in the way and how it could be even slower, even longer, even more centered. And if you get really curious about that, you'll start working the body. And as you start working the body, you'll see inside and outside are no different. The more you work this, the more you're working this.
How important is being present versus worried about the future or regretting or the past? How important is that in this whole operation?
Well, it's as I imagine you feel as well. It's really at the heart of it. Because to worry about the future or the past are thoughts in our head, thoughts from an I conditioned by its history of catastrophizing or being too optimistic, whatever it does, right? It's thoughts of an I. To be in the moment is the place where we can mix our energy with the energy of the moment and change can happen. Everything else is just the conditioning of an I.
How do we know if we are designed to be leaders? But they say too many chiefs and not enough Indians. How do we know if we're one of the ones that really can make a difference, that can be a change agent?
In my view, we're all here to do something. That authentic self-expression that creates value is not just meaning a certain hierarchical position. So just feeling into what is it I'm here to do? What lights me up? What is mine to give? What is it that I can't not do? There's a lot of ways to ask the question, but it's a question that each person can answer true to themselves. And in that answer, add value for others. So I don't say just some people are leaders. Now, there are some people who have, the gift of an enormous amount of charisma and bigness and, a hunger for power or whatever that puts them in certain positions more than others. So I don't deny that either. We all have our conditioning, our situation, our genetics, our upbringing, our karma, right? And everyone can be a leader when it comes to authentic self-expression that creates value.
When we talk about the whole and we talk about the individual, everybody's different, obviously. Are we each different pieces to a puzzle? And is the whole incomplete if one of us doesn't stand up and bring what we have, what we are?
Yeah, when we think of a puzzle like a jigsaw puzzle, we think about pieces in, pieces missing, and things like that. Um, if we were to start with that kind of image and then blur all the edges and then put the whole puzzle into every piece and the piece into the whole puzzle, we'd start to get at the deeper truth of this incredible net that we are participating in, where we are both a differentiated self and the whole picture. That's such an amazing paradox, but that is the truth of being human. And that's the truth. I don't ask you to believe me. I say, feel it yourself, experience it yourself, and you'll need no convincing that you are both part and whole.
Both part and whole. I like that a lot. Well, unfortunately, I have so enjoyed our time together. We could go on, but we are at the end. So, Ginny, thank you so much for coming on the show and bringing your vast well of knowledge.
Thank you, Gwilda. A joy to talk with you.
It was a real joy. Our guest this hour has been Dr. Ginny Whitelaw. Ginny is the author of numerous books, including Resonate, Zen, and the Way of Making a Difference. To find out more about Ginny, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit her website, zenleader.global. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.